which we are opening with an extraordinary panel of distinguished heads of state and government, whom I will introduce shortly. But first, I would like to celebrate for a moment the strong commitment of all of you here, and particularly of our co-chairs, of our partners, and of our members, to make this multi-stakeholder forum a catalyst for change and improvement of life conditions in Africa. I know there are many here who have been loyal since many, many years. I just would like to make the test. If those who have participated more than 5 times at this summit, please stand up. Thank you. The opportunities, threats and challenges that we are facing require a strong partnership, as we all know, of governments, business and civil society. They require also a strong African cooperation and a strong involvement and engagement of the world. What we want to do here is to give the best example, the finest example of public-private partnership. That's what the World Economic Forum is standing for. We have a rich program addressing in an action-oriented way all the key issues, and I want to thank all the different task forces and work groups which came or are coming together during this summit to find practical solutions for specific problems. The World Economic Forum deeply believes into the long-term opportunities of Africa. That is the reason why we have chosen as a theme capitalizing on opportunities. But we also, of course, want to give attention to the key risks, the key challenges which Africa is facing today, so that in the long run we can better concentrate on the opportunities. I have now the honor and pleasure to introduce the members of this panel, and of course, first of all, I welcome our host, His Excellency President Thabo Mbeki. Mr. President, you are not only an old-timer, as we just have seen, and you have been associated with the Forum actually since we had our first meeting in Geneva in '91, when you led the NAC delegation for a meeting which we organized with the business community. In the last 18 years, a lot has been achieved, and I think what is most impressive for me as an observer and for my colleagues is the transformation of minds, the transformation of perceptions. You have been the pioneer in creating a new brand for Africa. As the architect of the African Renaissance, as a leader in the creation of NEPAD and the African Union, you have elevated Africa to be a true global and respected partner. I would like to congratulate you on behalf of all of us here for those achievements, and thank you for the ongoing support and the hospitality which you provide us again. Your Excellency, President Kufuor from Ghana, a cordial welcome to you. We just met some days ago in London. I was very impressed by your engagement for the Millennium Development Goals. You represent here not only an important African country, but to put it into a nutshell, you are a role model for democratic transition and, I should say, good policies and good governance. I'm pleased to introduce to you the President of Malawi, His Excellency Mutharika. You are not only President of your country, I have seen since 2004, but you have taken direct charge of agricultural issues and food security as well as education. This demonstrates your commitment and your leadership in tackling the key challenges which not only your country but which the whole of Africa is facing. So a cordial welcome. Your Excellency, President Nkurunziza from Burundi, you represent a country which has demonstrated that with good leadership, tensions can be overcome and a peaceful society can be created. We are grateful that you have joined us here. And finally, it gives me particular pleasure to welcome His Excellency Prime Minister Odinga of Kenya. Myself, being close to our Foundation Board member of the Foundation Board of the World Economic Forum, Kofi Annan, I was, like all of you, following with particular interest the elections and the developments in your country. The world community and we all here are grateful that a solution could be found and a national unity government could be created. This step has shown the statesmanship from President Kibaki and yourself, Prime Minister Odinga. We are running this session as a panel, and I will ask several questions to the panelists. If there's time at the end, we have 90 minutes, you are cordially invited also to ask your questions. The first question, and I address myself to President Mbeki first. What in the present situation, I have to tell you, Mr. President, there's a lot of positive energy here in this room. I experienced it yesterday, I experienced it today, but there are many concerns. So we would like to know, what are your concerns at this particular moment? And I will ask afterwards, what do you see as key problems, as key roadblocks at the moment in the way for strong growth, political stability, and so on?
Thank you very much, Klaus. But let me start by saying welcome to everybody, particularly our foreign guests. We are glad that you've come back again in such numbers, back to South Africa and to Cape Town. Klaus, I think it's a wrong question. Why don't we start elsewhere?
I follow your advice, President, as always.
No, I think where we need to start is are not the concerns, but the positives. We'll come to the concerns. I don't want us to avoid them either. My view is that the African continent is evolving very well in the correct direction. You mentioned problems, challenges that faced us, both the countries and the continent, with regard both to Burundi and Kenya. And you have the President of Burundi and the Prime Minister of Kenya here. And I think what has happened in both countries communicates this positive message about the capacity, our capacity as Africans, indeed to confront our challenges and solve them. You would know, for instance, that with regard to Burundi, we are at the final stages of sorting out this issue of bringing everybody on board with regard to the important challenge of peace and security, with the agreement that's been reached between the government of Burundi and this particular group, Paripeutu FNL, which should restore peace and stability to Burundi after a long time. But that's a signal of a representative. It represents a part of a process that generally covers the African continent. And indeed, as you indicated with regard to Kenya, after the conflict, the end of December earlier this year, indeed the leadership of Kenya, assisted, as you said, by Kofi Annan, were able to resolve their problems. Not just in the interest of Kenya, but in the interest of the African continent. So I'm saying that one of the positives on the African continent, and one can talk about many other examples around the continent, generally there is progress towards addressing this issue of peace, stability, reaffirmation of the democratic processes, and so on. I think that's good. And my view is that that process on the continent is essentially irreversible. You might have setbacks from one country to the other, but globally on the continent, I believe that that process is irreversible. Secondly, I think everybody has been speaking very positively about the economic development on the African continent, higher rates of growth affecting many more countries, and indeed things I have been reading in the last few days indicate that the World Bank, the African Development Bank, Economic Commission for Africa, and so on, the OECD, continue to say the continent will continue to experience those higher rates of growth. With all the problems that we have, higher food prices, higher fuel prices, but the trend on the continent towards that higher economic growth will continue. That's another positive. On the continental level, I can say that even in recent meetings that we've had in the context of the African Union, the process, the progress towards better integration on the continent, starting with the regions, and a better focus by the African Union in terms of ensuring a general upliftment on the continent, affecting all elements, political elements, peace and stability, economic development, human resource development, technology, and all this. A much better focus on the all-African plane by the African Union and NEPAD towards uplifting the continent. So I'm saying that generally, I'm convinced that in all of these elements, the continent is moving in a correct direction. The concerns we'll come back to later.
We will.
Thanks.
We will.
All right.
President Kufuor, let's first start with the opportunities, and come back to the concerns later.
Thank you. I should say I'm a newcomer to Davos, and I'm impressed by what I'm seeing. I have a feeling that I'm facing the rest of the world, and it sounds good, especially since we all believe we are caught in the globalization process. It's good we get to know each other, and our concerns and our hopes. The opportunities for Africa are immense, because we know that the continent abounds in all the resources that we would need to grow and improve the quality of life of people generally. If you are talking of mineral wealth, potential for diversified energy resources, fertile lands to support agriculture, to grow food abundantly, human resource. I believe Africa is contributing remarkably to leadership. We have leadership. The trouble, though, is Africa is very big. It's a continent and of over 50 nations. Of course, not all of us are at the same level of development. But where Africa is good, Africa is very good. And where we are lacking, it's more as a result of history than any inherent shortcomings. So I believe with time and with good coordination, even in front of leadership, Africa should come abreast with the rest of the world. We need cooperation. We've started through the African Union and the regional groupings to try to organize Africa, coordinate Africa, make it a powerful entity to relate with the rest of the world, international community. Africa together should be able to hold its own vis-a-vis any of the international groupings, so that Africa may have fair trade, fair negotiation in all aspects. So Africa would hold its position with dignity. We are in the process, but we started not too long ago. And when you are talking of evolution, it takes time. But I believe the determination and goodwill are in place. Yes, occasionally we see some drawbacks, but I want to look on those things as teething problems. And so opportunities are here. If you talk of oil, now the crude oil market is threatening many of us. But around Africa, we keep on hearing of new finds of oil deposits. And we are told that perhaps in the end, Africa may hold more reserves than any other continent, even with this asset or commodity that currently is threatening many of us, those of us who haven't found oil yet. So all in all, I see great opportunities for Africa, and with the African Union and NEPAD asking for partnerships in an interdependent world. We expect positive responses from around the world for partnerships, for us to move into globalization or the global village. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. President Nkurunziza, you went just through a very grueling experience in your country. What can we learn? And President Mbeki was already very optimistic about the future of your country. What are your conclusions and what are the teachings of what you have experienced?
Thank you, Chairperson. Firstly, is that to mention here that Burundi is a country which passed in many problems, many conflicts, but now can say with our experience and with the support of the Africans, we succeed in our peace process. It's very important to mention here that if we have problems in our country or in Africa, the first thing to have as a success is to have a goodwill. Goodwill in order to have peace. Because without peace, you can't do anything. The problem we have seen in Burundi as in Africa, especially about peace. If you don't have peace, it's not possible to develop your country. And we said that the base is peace and security. You can have many resources, minerals, or human resources, but if you have no peace, there is no way to develop your country. That's why, with our experiences in Burundi, we see after the ceasefire agreement, with peace, there is hope. There is hope to develop our country. And it's not only Burundi to be an example, but it is also other countries in Africa which passed through many conflicts, but now they are very rich. You can see also in Europe, in America, there is many countries which were poor. There were many conflicts, but now they are developed countries. So for us, the big challenge or the big problem in Africa to be resolved is to have solution in our conflicts. After solutions, we have a problem about the population, which is increasing every year. The number is increasing, but the resources are not corresponding to the number of our population. So even we have a possibility to have solutions, we must have an educated people to go to school, to know the consequence, the problems which will come if you are not educated, because the resources in Africa are limited. So the solution, we can't only say to have only problems, but the good way also to have a developed country is to have the possibility to go to school, and also to have possibility to change our mind. The mentality is very important. How can develop our country when you can see in our mentality a man can have 5 wives? It's a problem. Yeah, it's a problem. If you have around more than 10 children, it's a problem. So we must change our mind to see what we have and what we must do to do. That problem in Africa is very big. You can see our country, the number of the people is very high than the facilities we have to help our people. This is a big problem. It's the cause of the poverty. Poverty is only the lack of money. No. The lack of food is a poverty. The lack of schools is poverty. The lack of health center is a poverty. The lack of how to go to school, if you have no food, if you have no shoes, you can see our children go to school without shoes. It's a problem. So the big solution to our continent is to have a program to fight against poverty. And there is a hope, because now we have some success in some countries. Slowly we are going to succeed, and there is a hope in Africa. Thank you very much, Mr. Fiamma.
Thank you. Before turning to President Mutharika, I would like to follow up immediately with you, Prime Minister Odinga. I think the world was surprised how fragile the Kenyan society was. And that was a negative surprise. But I think there was also a positive surprise that you found a solution in the national unity government. What is your experience? What conclusions do you draw, not only for your country, but for the rest of Africa?
Well, let me first begin by bringing greetings to the participant here from the people of Kenya, who, as you know, that Kenyans have been through a very trying period following the distributed presidential elections of December last year. That was followed by protest by the people of Kenya, who felt that they were being cheated. The crisis lasted 2 months, or more than 2 months, during which over 1,500 people lost their lives. 350,000 people became internally displaced. But this dispute actually showed the soft underbelly of our society, that for over 40 years of our independence, we believed the lie that we are a united country, but that deep down there were ethnic tensions running very deep, and that the society was fairly fragile and fragmented. It actually has shown us that there is need to move with speed to try to bring harmony and proper understanding among the people of our country. But what we have seen in Kenya is not unique to Kenya. It is a continental problem, and it is a problem of bad governance that Africa has witnessed since independence. Africa, the richest continent in the world in terms of resources, is unfortunately also the poorest. This is a contradiction in kind. And we keep on blaming colonialism all the times. But Africa was not the only continent that was colonized. So was Asia, and so on. At independence, the economy of Kenya was equivalent to that of South Korea. Same with Ghana. In terms of GDP, in terms of per capita income, in terms of literacy levels, in terms of levels of industrialization, all the major economic indicators were the same. 45 years down the road, Korea's economy is 40 times larger than that of Kenya. So you ask yourself, what is it? What did the Koreans do wrong, right, that Kenyans got wrong? And that applies across board to most of African countries. The mediocrity with which Africa has been ruled is what is responsible for African underdevelopment. As an Afro-optimist, as opposed to Afro-pessimist, who believes in the ability of the African people to develop the African continent, I believe that we must try to harness the resources of our continent and to make use of the manpower that we have, because many Africans are out of Africa, highly qualified in the United States, in Europe, and so on. Make use of the skilled manpower that we have. Also, involve our people more in development. And in that way, we will be able to catch up with the rest of the world. We need to follow the examples that have been used in other parts of the world. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. And I agree with President Thabo Mbeki that things are changing. And African leaders are silent about it. It would not happen in Europe. I conclude by saying, let us say what we mean and mean what we say when we talk about African development. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. President Mutharika.
Thank you, moderator. I think the first point is for Africa to realize that Africa is not a poor continent. I always get worried when you get in the textbooks and other things, Africa is a poorest continent. It is not. As a matter of fact, Africa is probably the richest continent in the world. But the people of Africa are poor. And I think we must understand that difference. That we Africans are sitting on riches. But it doesn't mean that the continent itself is poor, because Europe, North America, and others developed on the wealth of Africa. And therefore, you cannot come from a poor continent and others making riches out of that. So we need to change the mindset very, very significantly and rapidly. And so, in that process of change, we must change from the so-called Afro-pessimism to what my friend says Afro-optimism. And we are not saying we should work for Afro-centricity, but we are simply saying let us recognize, both as Africa as well as the rest of the world, that we have all the wealth to enable us to transform our continent and our people from poverty to prosperity. I would even dare say that presently the world food shortage will be solved here in Africa. It will be Africa that will have the capacity to be able to feed the rest of the world, because we have vast areas of land that still need to be exploited. My own country, Malawi, for instance, we can grow hundreds of thousands of tons, metric tons of rice within a short period. It's all there. So therefore, let us change from a very pessimistic approach to really a good optimistic approach. We can do it, we are there. But in that process, what are the problems or issues or challenges? I think one of them is extreme poverty. We do not have the right to be poor in Africa. We can get out of this. And therefore, that will be, the biggest challenge that we must have. And I think globally, we must accept this challenge and work together, but much more so at the regional and African level. We must do this. I think the second challenge is to be able to feed ourselves. We have huge agricultural lands, we have huge water resources for irrigation, and virtually every crop can grow on this continent. And yet, we are unable to feed ourselves. Why is that? And I think that should be another challenge that we should address ourselves. Can't we turn things around? Yes, we can. Malawi, for instance, for the last 25 years, we were always begging. The president was supposed to do a ritual every year, going down on your knees and say, please help us, give us food. until 2004, when I said enough is enough, I'm not going to go on my knees to beg for food. Let us grow the food ourselves. And indeed we have. For the last 4 years, we have consistently had surpluses. So we are saying, if Malawi can do it, surely many African countries can do it. So, food security. The third challenge, that is of a sharing of power. Africans, we have not learned to share power. When you get it, it's yours for keeps. And I suppose this stems from the principle of winner takes all. I've always worried about this, because in a democratic process, there will be winners and losers. But the end result is, how do you share the proceeds of that power? And here we are not only talking about political power. We have economic power, social power, religious power, information power, economic, and all that. When you get it, do you simply keep it in your pocket as yours, or do you share it? And so how do we share? So the problems that my colleague Nkurunziza was saying is basically that. Because of inability to want to share powers, we have conflicts that could have been avoided. And I think somewhere along the line, we've got to learn to share that power. Then the fourth challenge, probably, I mean there are many, but I'll end there, is really finding the role of Africa in the global village. Where is Africa in the global village? This is a question that we have glossed over, and yet is so fundamental, because many of the problems we have listed are based on that. I always see the global village in a very interesting framework. In that village, there are some who are in the living room, they are having champagne, and in the same village, there are some who are on the veranda, they haven't entered yet, they are sitting there. I suppose it's okay, it's in the shade, but they are not sharing the champagne. But in the same village, there are others who are outside in the yard, in the sun. They haven't even got into the veranda. Then there are those who are on the outskirts of the village. They're still part of the global village. Where is Africa in that scenario? Are we inside sharing the champagne, or are we on the veranda, or are we in the yard, or in the outskirts of the village? And this is a fundamental issue. This is a fundamental issue. So the noise we are making in Africa, as I say, it's not Afrocentrism. We are simply saying we have a role to play in the global arena, but that role is not available to us. The General Assembly, the Security Council, the Economic and Social Council, everywhere else, we are still not really part and parcel or an integral part of that game. So I believe that this is really one of the issues, but I will not go into the solutions now. We are told just to look at the problems. In summary, 1, poverty; 2, not enough food for everybody; 3, inability to share power; 4, where is Africa in the global village? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think we heard many arguments which make us quite upbeat, and we had a definition of the key problems. I would like to come back to you, President Mbeki, and stick to my first question. What do you see as possible stumbling blocks for sustained economic development and social coherence?
Well, I think, Klaus, our discussions always about this African issue have been bedeviled by the fact that we are dealing with many countries. Different levels of development, different challenges, and so it is indeed difficult to discuss this notion, this one big elephant called Africa. But let me just say something about the matters that President Nkurunziza was raising when he was insisting on the need for peace and stability as a condition for development. One of the problems the continent faces, which we are trying to deal with, is a problem of instability that stretches across the Sahel. You'll find this problem in Mauritania, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Niger, crosses into Chad and Sudan. It's a belt of instability there which would impact negatively on the continent in the manner that President Nkurunziza was addressing. As I'm saying that the African continent is trying to deal with this challenge, it's a specific challenge with particular expressions as you go from country to country. That's one problem. We have outstanding problems, two problems that affect a very important country on the African continent, that is the Sudan. That's the Darfur problem, and the challenge of the implementation of the comprehensive peace agreement between North and Southern Sudan. Fortunately, the major problems with regard to the deployment in Darfur have been sorted out. What's not been sorted out are the political negotiations involving all the rebel groups in Darfur and the government of Sudan. That's a problem that requires attention, and the problem between North and South Sudan with regard to implementation of ABIE, implementation of the comprehensive peace agreement between North and South is an important problem, and there's a problem erupted recently in the conflict around an area of Sudan called ABIE. That's a matter that we have to attend to. As a problem of the collapse of the state of Somalia. The current conflict that's taking place there, which is affecting not only Somalia, but the countries that neighbor Somalia. That's an important problem which needs to be solved. Fortunately, the conflict affecting northern Uganda, we're close to a resolution of that in the sense of the agreement that has been reached between the Ugandan government and the Lord's Resistance Army, the LRA. And indeed, hopefully, that agreement will be signed quite soon. The situation in the DRC, particularly in the east of the DRC with regard to that particular conflict, is also moving well. Now I'm talking about, then of course there is the outstanding problem which the African Union is trying to deal with of the conflict between Chad and Sudan. I'm talking here about situations of violent conflict within countries, between countries. That's a matter of concern which needs to be addressed, and indeed some of it might derive from what the Prime Minister Raila Odinga was talking about the matter of ethnic tensions. But this is a matter of concern, has got to continue to be a matter of concern to ourselves as the African continent. There are then these internal challenges that relate to democratic processes. Again, Prime Minister Raila Odinga referred to this with regard to Kenya, referred to it with regard to Zimbabwe. And these are challenges that the continent will have to continue to address. This is one group of challenges. Professor Schwab which relate to a very, very fundamental matter on the continent. It has been fundamental for many decades. Peace, stability, the construction of democratic systems. We are moving in the right direction. End of November, Cote d'Ivoire has its elections after a delay of many years. Nigeria had their elections next year, contested, lots of accusations about all sorts of things, quite correctly. Nigerian judiciary intervened, annulled a number of elections, and so you've had a rerun in a number of the states of Nigeria because of that. And interestingly, the reruns, properly run, have produced the same political results. But the point I'm making is that here is an area of concern. Manifests itself in different ways, in different parts of the African continent, but all of them require the necessary attention. And I must end by saying, I'm only talking about one matter, the matter of peace and stability and democracy on the continent, by saying that consequently, we are indeed paying a lot of attention to the issue of the capacities of the African Union to attend to these issues. Whether they are matters of violent conflict, or matters of observing elections, or matters of the implementations of the rules and regulations of the African Union with regard to democratic processes, issues of the operations of the African Court on Peoples and Human Rights, all of these matters. But here is an area of concern. But in the end, what I'm saying about all of that is that the continent is moving forward with regard to all of these matters, but they remain an area of concern. I'll talk about other areas of concern, but I'm trying to indicate the importance of disaggregating the continent. This animal called Africa is Africa in different bits and pieces. And I think a correct approach to it, certainly from our point of view as Africans, we can't treat it as an aggregated whole. We've got to say, here is a challenge here, how do we respond to it? But I think globally, even with regard to this question, the continent is indeed making progress. Thanks.
Thank you, President Mbeki. What you just said is contributing to this, I would say, schizophrenic perception which we have of Africa. On the one hand, the good side, on the other, and the positive developments. On the other hand, the negative situation you just described, and very much, let's say, pinpointed usually by the media. President Kufuor, would you like to contribute to this analysis of, let's say, more the problems and what should be done?
Yes, if you look at Africa like a picture now, take a picture of Africa today, you would see a checkered continent with positives and negatives. But I agree very much with President Mbeki that Africa, in spite of this static view, is really moving, evolving. And we cannot really overlook the fact of history. Colonialism truly left us some very, very difficult marks over which we must succeed. We must push ourselves forward. If you look at Kenya, for instance, and I was there, I'm sure Raila would admit, at a glance, with a sense of history, you could sense that there was failure of leadership, and it was more because of the conditioning of mind left that beautiful nation by the past, the colonial history. And unless we're going to get leaders that would see beyond the divides that the system left us, so they would then try to form nation of all the component parts within the geographical bounds left us by the colonial system. Very likely, we move one step forward and two steps backwards. That's what happened in Kenya from my little insight I got there. Because these are the leadership there, the people I found, were people highly educated, people who had worked together before, even in parties and governments before. And then on this slight trip of mishandled elections, all of a sudden there was this flash that within 1 month killed over 1,000 people, destroyed a lot of property. And when they were sort of halted in their tracks and pushed a bit, they all admitted they had done something wrong. What could trigger this chaos that happened in Kenya? And I believe it was the fact that at independence, most of us tried to sweep under the carpet the challenges that had been left us. We didn't tackle the problems at the roots. We forgot that before colonialism, a lot of the continent lived in tribes. Tribes with different cultures and languages and traditions. Then the system forced all of us into artificial boundaries. Within the colonial times, nobody had any rights against the colonial masters. So when they left, and they didn't leave us with groomed leadership. So when Mr. A got it, as my brother from Malawi said, such a leader was unable to share. He would talk democracy, but his democracy would mean the winner should take all. To get him out of power, some soldier had to resort to a coup d'etat. This is the story of Africa. And we must admit that it's only the past 2 decades that Africa is seeing the type of leadership that is tending to see beyond the tribal bounds. And this is where the Renaissance idea that President of South Africa and a few of our colleagues launched, and which I believe is helping us to rediscover ourselves and the way forward for us. And this is at the bottom of the new Africa that is having more democratically elected presidents than the strong men, khaki men with guns. And this trend, I don't think is going to be reversed, because in the information age, with the help of ICT, television and all, the people generally are beginning to see beyond their tribal boundaries. They are beginning to see the potential that they all represent. They see that constitutionality with accountability from leaders. When we talk democracy, this is the new democracy that is happening. It's not an invention or reinvention of the wheel, but with the help of information, everybody is now beginning to feel they also count, and they are demanding this of leadership. And with this trend, more and more of Africa, I believe, will be awakened. But then even as we awaken ourselves in our current nation states, many of which are very, very small, and therefore not serious markets, we then have to admit that the African Union with the regional groupings, talking of unification of Africa, are the thing that must be upheld and pursued. Because if you take West Africa, for instance, if you pick us as nations, yes, Nigeria is big. Nigeria has a population of 140 million. Ghana may be next, but with only 22 million. The rest of the countries are around 5 million, 10 million. If we want to persist as individual nationalities or nations or countries, we won't be a serious market. Our former masters and bigger international trading partners will continue to divide and rule us, exploit us. But if we can come together in West Africa, we'll be a population of easily over 250 million nation. And given the resources at our disposal and the enlightened leadership that we must have, a leadership that would have to account. People are demanding transparency now. I'm telling you, we can then benefit from the economies of scale, and we can negotiate very effectively. Say if it's some oil blocks that our partners from elsewhere would want from us, we would negotiate fairly. If it's for some mining concession, if it's for attraction of FDIs, because I believe it is much easier to make the next $1 million for any corporate entity from anywhere in Africa than from, say, Europe or America. And if they come and they find that governments are developing their human resource, the infrastructure is laid, there's abundant energy supplies, and that such partners would come with markets, would come with know-how to share with us. Why wouldn't they come? And that, when we capture that stage, we would really be mainstreaming ourselves into the international trends or globalization. And that's when really Africa would look eyeball to eyeball with the rest of the international community. The process is on, but what is left now is the leadership with the vision of where we are going, and the leadership that transcends the narrow tribal and small nation divide. This is what we are looking for in West Africa. It's difficult to get there because among us, even now, leader A of country A really insists on sovereignty. Is not too prepared to concede within the regional groupings. We talk theoretically of regional markets, but what we find, to cross from one nation to the other, same people, sometimes artificially divided by colonial borders, they talk different languages. Ghana would speak English, Togo, which is next door and same tribe as Ghana, speaks French. And to cross from Ghana to Togo is a big problem. We can't overcome the customs divide. We treat ourselves as... So we need leaders that would use history to look ahead when we achieve this, and when we also get leaders that can carry their peoples along with them into such associations and unions. Then I'm telling you, Africa's problems would be receding, and then the bigger Africa of potential would come into focus. So I believe these are some of the challenges we have. Political leadership, economic leadership, social, then private sector development. Because so far, I take Ghana for example. Ghana came into independence in 1957, as Raila observed. Same level as South Korea or Malaysia. Now, if you compare the Ghana economy with the South Korean economy, South Korea is light years ahead of Ghana. Why? Because somehow we allowed, leadership allowed itself to be tricked into ideologies that we didn't understand. We wouldn't allow the private sector to grow. But now we are waking up, and the private sector is looming. I've seen quite a few examples around here. Perhaps even billionaires, African billionaires, through hard work, entrepreneurial initiatives, they are doing it. And I believe 10 years down the line, 20 years, if we go this way, more coordinated with sound leadership, I'm telling you, Africa will be catching up because we have the resources that should make us succeed. Thank you.
Let me follow up on one specific point. We spoke about Africa's place in the global village. We will have soon the G8 summit in Tokyo, and Prime Minister Fukuda, when he was in Davos, he focused his speech very much on Africa. We have here Mrs. Sadako Ogata. Now, my question would be, also coming back from Yokohama, what do you expect from the next G8? I don't know who wants to take the floor. What do you expect from the next G8?
Well,
and I see that Mrs. Ogata is taking notes. She took her pencil.
Well, Mr. Moderator, let me bail the cat. I think that the development of Africa is primarily the responsibility of Africans, and I think we all accept that. Nobody is going to develop Africa for us. The Asians developed Asia, the Americans developed Asia, the Europeans developed Europe, and it's now the time for Africa to develop Africa. But within that framework, we have now the global village. As a matter of fact, the world is much smaller because of science and technology, and therefore we really cannot envision any strategy or policy that can be developed or implemented outside the framework of global interchange. So within that concept, clearly we expect the G8 to maybe look at the issue of Africa more closely than has been the case in the previous summits. First of all, we would want Africa to contribute to the solution of the global food crisis through a green revolution. Already we have started working towards that. And I think if globally we can recognize, as I said before, that there are great potentials in Africa for realizing that, we would be able to contribute effectively to the solution of the global situation. Here, what we are looking for is not food aid to Africa. It may be necessary for short-term solutions, but as a long-term solution, we need huge investments in agriculture and food production. We need to apply science and technology in a consistent manner in order that when the food starts to be produced, it is produced consistently. So there we need a new approach. I think also, apart from commercialization of agriculture, we have to also balance it up with the socialization of agriculture. In other words, as a government, it is our responsibility to provide food to everybody, all our people. But at the same time, we know that in order for food to be produced more effectively, there must be commercialization. Otherwise, agriculture must be profitable, and there must be incentives for people to remain in agriculture. So we need that. Commercial entrepreneurs, entrepreneurship has to be looked at side by side with the provision of subsidies. Clearly, the poor African farmers, most of whom are women, cannot survive without subsidies. This we have seen. We have proved it in Malawi, and I think other parts of Africa as well. So globally, both at the World Bank and at the IMF and others, the European Union, we have to think differently about the provision of subsidies in order to make sure that there is food productivity, both at the subsistence level as well as at the commercial level. And of course, with that, we expect globally the G8 to assist us to develop the infrastructure, including energy, because that's very, very fundamental. You cannot produce food somewhere and let it rot without moving somewhere else. And in fact, to deal with the global situation, food situation, entails the ability to move food very quickly and efficiently from food surplus areas or countries to food deficit areas or countries. And therefore, infrastructure is very fundamental in this development. And finally, of course, there is a need for us to look at investment in irrigation and water development, because at the end of everything else, there must be water. Africa must move decisively from heavy dependence on rain-fed agriculture, because experience shows that when agriculture fails, then food production fails. When food production fails, the economic development collapses. And that must be tied in there. Finally, let me leave you with some of my concerns. I believe, and very strongly too, that a stronger Africa economically is a better trading partner for the North than a weaker Africa. That again goes to the mindset I made before. Africa must be made economically stronger for us to be a better trading partner for the North. We have seen that in Southeast Asia. The stronger the countries became, the better trading partner they became for Europe and North America. Why not for Africa? And then finally, I believe that a partner who walks with you hand in hand down the road is better than a partner whom you have to carry on your shoulders down the road. And Africa is just about not willing anymore to be carried on somebody's shoulder down the road. We want to walk with the rest of the world hand in hand. And so, I think the G8 countries, if they were to look at this scenario and see how best they can fit in and assist Africa, will be contributing to the solution of not only right now global food shortage, but also global poverty. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, please. And any additional contribution? Maybe first, Prime Minister?
I just want to, I will buy most of the points which have been raised by President Mutharika to strengthen that. Only I want to underscore two other points, that is investment, because I believe strongly that Africa does not need aid. Aid has been there for a long time. African continent has received a lot of aid in monetary terms without much to show for it. And therefore, I believe strongly that what we need is investment and market access to goods that are produced in Africa. Some protective measures that are practiced by members of the G8 restrict access of goods that are produced in Africa to those markets. And I think it is very important that this issue continues to be raised so that we can be able to sell what we produce. There are four enemies of the African people: ignorance, poverty, disease, and bad governance are the ones that we need to tackle in order to develop Africa. Africa is underdeveloped mainly because it has not confronted those four major enemies effectively. Now, we need to invest heavily in those areas. Infrastructure, and I talked about infrastructure 3 times. It's very important because that is how we'll be able to open up African continent for development. It is fitting that this meeting is taking place here in Cape Town, because you remember more than 100 years ago, the late Cecil Rhodes, that Kaburu, conceived a trans-African highway running from Cape Town to Cairo. And I'm sure that if people like Cecil Rhodes had lived, that highway would have been constructed today. We are still meeting here. That dream has not been realized. Africa still is a virgin continent. Therefore, Africa is crying for investments. Right now, the price of steel, cement, and fertilizer is very high on the international market. Why? Because of China. China is consuming a lot of steel, a lot of cement, a lot of fertilizers. Why? Because China is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Most of these raw materials are coming from Africa and being exported raw. We need to retain some of these raw materials to develop African continent. Now, yes, I agree we have inherited difficult situations, but so did Europe. Germany consisted of tribes which were fighting against each other for years. There was a time when they were fighting internally for 33 years. Napoleon just moved in and conquered them. But then Bismarck came and united them and told them that if you don't unite and work hard, the English and the French will look down upon you like second-class Europeans. They united and eventually fought the other European nations twice. But today, what is happening? Germany, who speak German, and French, who speak French, are partners in the European Union. If a Greek can travel from Athens on an ID card up to Dublin in Ireland, why should it not be possible for a South African to travel from here to Kenya without a problem? We have a problem. We don't have the luxury of time as Africans. We still have this. We know very clearly that we don't have the economies of scale within our borders. Yet we don't want to move as if we're people who have a sense of urgency. President Kufuor has just talked about this scenario in Western Africa, the same in East Africa, in Southern Africa, and so on. Why can't we as Africans see the necessity to open up our borders much faster so that we can be able to benefit from the economies of scale? Why do we continue to blame our colonial past? I believe very strongly that it is possible to fast-track this development so that ECOWAS, SADC, East African Community can move together the way they have in Europe, the European Union. Let us try to find ways and means of trying to fuse these boundaries and create a much larger African market. Thank you.
President, just a small point. I don't think I've heard anybody blame the colonial past in the sense Raila is putting it. But if you're going to tackle a problem and you do not do in-depth analysis to know why things are as they are, there, as I said, you'd move 2 steps forward only to move another backwards. I believe that was the problem in Kenya. And I'm saying the real problem is getting the enlightened leadership that rises above the colonial past as well as the tribal divisions, to see to getting the people along, to appreciating the economies of scale. If we get a leadership that is responsive and at the same time leading the right way, I'm telling you, we cross boundaries just like that. But for as long as we keep thinking in our tribal minds for so long, we'll be beaten about the bush. That's the point I wanted to make. But we must know that we are in some of the holes. We are because a lot of the leadership hasn't risen out of the holes to lead the rest of us on. That's the point I want to make. But we must know the problem.
I think a very important point. President Mbeki, do you want to come back also to the issue of the G8? And if you could integrate into your remarks a short comment on the Doha round and where we stand in your opinion and what should be done, what urgency there is.
Well, I thought that President Kufuor was going to talk about Bismarck and Cecil Rhodes, and he didn't. With regard to the G8, I think you referred, Professor Schwab, to the conference in Yokohama, where many African leaders attended that conference, the TICAD 4. I believe that it was a very important conference from this point of view with regard to the G8. The conference confirmed the principal areas of concentration that the African continent had agreed with regard to NEPAD, whether it's agriculture or value adding to the mineral resources and so on, and human resource development, education, health, all of these questions. Confirmed that program. And secondly, the Japanese government did a very important thing. It said, with regard to all of these matters, we want to announce specific resources in the context of agreements that had been reached within the G8, that we as the Japanese government will commit specific resources to address these particular challenges as identified in the NEPAD program. So I'm sure that part of what we need to take from Yokohama to Hokkaido is the example that has been set by the Japanese government. Because what's happened is that we have a G8 Africa Action Plan. G8 Africa Action Plan, which was originally agreed in Canada, Kananaskis. And in successive meetings between the African continent and the G8, the principal issue has been about the implementation of that G8 Africa Action Plan. I'm saying what happened in Yokohama, that Prime Minister Fukuda said, there's the infrastructure issue that's agreed, we commit these resources. There's a matter of agricultural development which has been agreed, we commit these resources. There's a matter of changing the nature of goods that Africa trades with the rest of the world, not just raw materials, and therefore we are going to lead government and the big corporate sector of Japan who are coming to the African continent to identify these investment possibilities so that we can participate in the process of producing these goods which Africa can trade with the rest of the world other than raw materials. So I'm saying there's a whole number of decisions that were announced there, consistent with what we had agreed in the NEPAD program. And I don't know whether this is the case, whether this was intended by the Japanese government, but I should imagine that it would serve as an important challenge to the G8 to say how are they, the rest, responding to the actual dedication of resources to meet the programs that have already been agreed between the G8 and the African continent. And that must be our expectation. Going to Hokkaido, that we will indeed get commitments of a similar kind, of a practical kind, with regard to the meeting of these agreements between the G8 and the African continent. That has to be the outcome of Hokkaido. And I'm saying that I think the Japanese government has set some important benchmarks with regard to what needs to be done to give real life to this partnership between the G8 and the African continent. And that includes addressing the matter that President Tarek is raising of a response to the food crisis. Because at the base of it must indeed, as he has indicated, lie a determined effort to implement the comprehensive African agricultural development program. It's agreed, it's part of our African program, it exists, it requires resources to produce this food and all of that. The WTO processes, the Minister of Trade and Industry of South Africa is sitting in front of me here. Each time I speak to him and to the DG of the WTO, Pascal Lamy, they say to me, conclusion of these matters is around the corner. It's there's a very small gap among the negotiating partners, really just a small little hop, and we're there. And I believe them. They tell me that every 6 months, but I do believe them. I mean, it is obviously important that the matter must be solved. And there are all manner of technicalities about coefficients and this and that, and the levels of agricultural support, etc. But I really do hope that as part of this sequence of meetings that is coming now in Japan, where you will have the G8, you will have the G5, China, India, Brazil, Mexico, ourselves, you'll have the African component, that it might be possible even in that context to give further spurt to the resolution of these WTO things, challenges, because indeed I think there's a generally shared belief that the matters that need to be resolved are not that many, the gaps are not that big, but the Lamim-Patwa promise, I think, I don't know what it needs to change it into reality. But the problem persists. But I think there's generally an optimistic view which then translates into these undertakings that we'll find a solution around the corner. The corner seems to be a bit far, but anyway, it's still there, it's a corner. Thanks, Klaus.
Thank you, President Beck. Very short point.
The small additional point, reinforcing President Mbeki's hopefulness, is that Japan also agreed to the establishment of a monitoring and evaluation system to follow through on its commitments over the next 4 or 5 years. And I'm hoping that the G8 would also commit itself to this arrangement so that we can all move along or forward together.
Thank you. Unfortunately, time is running out. It's a fascinating discussion. We will conclude in a moment, and I will ask each of the presidents a final question. When we have finished, please remain seated. We will have a short award ceremony. You will see details in a moment. Now, instead of summarizing myself this fascinating, very rich, very optimistic, very realistic session, I would like to ask each of the distinguished panelists to tell us in a minute what he would like to see his most important legacy when his presidency comes to an end. So, I start with the President of Malawi, or with the President, I'm sorry, of Burundi.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The first legacy I want to give to my people of Burundi, as you know, Burundi passed in many conflicts. What I want to see in my country is to see Burundian people together, united. And you see that all those conflicts we had faced can be finished. It's the first thing. Where is the cause of those conflicts? In my country, the main cause was exclusion. And that's why we have taken as priority to unite our people, to let our people, especially the children, go to school. Because if you didn't go to school, you have no chance to access to facilities in your life. It was a very problem. You can't go in the army, you can't go in the administration, you can't go anyway. That's why we have taken decision to give a free primary education to our people. And to accompany this decision, we have started to build many primary schools. And I think in the 2 last years, we have built around 200 primary schools. And I want to see, after my mandate, to see that all children of Burundi must have the chance to go to school. It's a good way to unite our people. It's a good way also to reconcile the people. Another thing which is very important, when we take the decision to let the children go to school, especially to correct those problems, because there were some regions which were developed and the others were forgotten. That's why when we started to build schools, we start in those regions where there are many problems. So you can find now, in each province, you can find around 20 schools, new schools. It's very important. And another thing which is very important is that to let the people to access to the medical cares, because there were exclusion also in many sectors, especially in health sectors. There are some provinces which you can't see, you can't see an hospital. And we have taken decision also to give free medical cares to the children under 5 years and to the women who are pregnant go to the hospital free. So this decision, we must correct also the problem we have seen in the problems in some provinces. There are no health centers and no hospitals. But now, when we start to take this decision, we start also to build many health centers in those areas where they have been forgotten. So I can see that if I can finish my mandate, I can give the legacy to my people to have chance to go to school and the hospital. Thank you very much.
President Mutharika.
Mr. Moderator, about 3 months after I was sworn in as president in 2004, one reporter asked me, said, Mr. President, what do you plan to do when you retire? And I said, I'm only 3 months on holiday, and the retirement isn't on my agenda. But anyway, I then told him that when I retire, I'll buy me a rocking chair. I think you all know a rocking chair. And I'll sit down on my veranda and rock for 6 months. And then after that, I said, come and ask me what I want to do, and I'll let you know. But more seriously, the agenda for development of Malawi, of my country, and of Africa is so large, and their priorities so pressing, that I really would not like to go into the statistics of what we want to do. Suffice to say that we've set in motion development programs for each and every sector of the economy. And we are moving all these sectors together. The sum total of which is that at the time of my retirement, I want to leave Malawi better than I found it. Thank you.
President Mbeki.
Well, Klaus, earlier when President Mutharika spoke, he spoke about the contradiction between a mineral resource-rich Africa, but whose people are poor. I think we're discussing here this matter of capitalizing on opportunity. We have some very interesting developments taking place in Nigeria. Unfortunately, President Yar'Adua couldn't stay. He left this afternoon, couldn't be with us this evening. Because I think he would have told us, some Nigerians, I'm sure, in the audience, who would tell a very interesting story about what Nigeria is doing to manage those resources. Manage them in a way that addresses the problem of poverty. Very important developments taking place there. I think that if you looked at what is happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo, you would find similar processes. I'm making that point really to say, I think that it would mark a very important advance on our continent in terms of addressing this very basic challenge of poverty and underdevelopment that indeed we saw evolving everywhere on our continent, the same processes that we can see in Nigeria and the Congo, same processes of saying, how do we manage these resources and the wealth they generate so that they produce the development that we need and they produce the advances against poverty that we need. And I think there are some examples that are being set on the continent. And hopefully, I have president of the ANC is here. How many months do I have in government? But that by the time that comes, really if we could have, as a continent, taken on board this matter of the better management of our resource base and the utilization of that resource base to address this matter of poverty, I think that would be a very good legacy. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, of all my colleagues on the platform here, I'm closest to retirement. I've got just about 6 months to go. And I believe that perhaps the richest asset a nation can have is the people, its people. And my government set to work quickly when we got the opportunity 8 years ago to ensure that we introduced free and compulsory universal basic education for all the children of the country, from kindergarten right to age 16, at the expense of the states. And thankfully, I have been able to lead the government in launching this. We believe the educated citizenry should be able to look after itself, should be able to keep its leadership in the right direction, get the leadership to be accountable, should be less dependent on others, meaning it should be more self-reliant. And given the resources that, again, I believe under my watch, my country has been able to put together, to the extent that we even expect that Ghana should join the middle-income nations within the next decade. And with the oil find recently, we are more convinced we'll get there. I believe the well-educated citizenry with this wealth should be moving in the right direction into the international community with dignity. And not only that, we have used a democratic constitution since 1992. So since then, we've changed governments by the ballot box 4 times. And I took over from, was in opposition, took over from a government in place. We beat the government to take power. I'm going to go out for the ballot box to work. Of course, I expect my side would win to continue where I live off. So I will leave smoothly and fairly power to the next generation of leaders in Ghana. And I believe that should be the way forward for us. Further, Ghana prides itself as the gateway to West Africa, the sub-region of West Africa, meaning already Ghana sees itself as relating with the neighbors or the neighboring countries. And through that, we believe the common market, we aspire to the bigger markets, we aspire to maximize economic benefits, including inflows of foreign investments will be happening. So we have foreseen, we have the plans already to do an aviation hub to service West Africa. We are trying to lay rails to link us with our neighboring countries. We are part of a power pool to supply the West African. And we believe with the realization of these things, perhaps ECOWAS will become an example to be replicated elsewhere on the continent. So this is the vision. Ghana coming into its own with dignity. That's what I foresee and I hope for Ghana.
Thank you, President. Prime Minister.
Thank you. Maybe I'm the one who is farthest away from retiring. But I'll quote 2 people who I admire very strongly. One is Martin Luther King Jr. King had a dream that one day the black children and the white children shall live and play together and shall be judged not by the color of their skin but by the content of their character. I have a dream that before I exit the political stage, every Kenyan child, man and woman shall be judged not by his ethnic or tribal origin, but by the content of their character. two, I have a dream that every Kenyan child from the cradle shall have equal access to quality education irrespective of their social background, and that every Kenyan woman shall have equal rights with their male counterparts.
Thank you.
I want to conclude. I have a dream of a society where the private sector shall be the engine of wealth creation, that the government role shall be that of regulation, and that the government shall work together with the private sector in ensuring that wealth is created, and that through devolution of power, resources shall be equitably distributed across our society. In conclusion, I am very much inspired by the book of Lee Kuan Yew, From Third to the First World. I believe very strongly in transforming our society from a struggling, poor third world country to a second and first world economy, and know that it is doable. And what is good for the goose is good for the gander. What I'm wishing for Kenya, I also wish for the rest of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Distinguished presidents, participants, if you stay for 5 minutes for a short ceremony. But before starting the ceremony, please join me again to thank this panel, which was extraordinary in its contents, in its openness, and in showing true leadership.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am Hilde Schwab. I am a co-founder and chair of the Schwab Foundation for Social Entrepreneurship. I had prepared a little bit a different start for my short introduction, but I can see that I can continue with the good news after this very positive ending. The next minutes are about individuals who see opportunities in even seemingly insurmountable challenges. I talk about social entrepreneurs. Social entrepreneurs are a vital and essential part of our society. Their primary motivation is to find pragmatic, innovative solutions to social problems. Often, they can revolutionize entire industries or create systemic change. Their organizations have a direct social impact to improve the fate of millions of people who would otherwise be excluded from the marketplace and the benefits of economic development. To promote these people and their new models of sustainable social change, Klaus Schwab and I have created and endowed a new organization in 1998, the Schwab Foundation for Social Entrepreneurship. During the last decade, the Foundation has been looking for the best role models in order to highlight their work and give them access to global and regional decision makers through the World Economic Forum. We have created a network of over 140 social entrepreneurs worldwide, and in cooperation with media and other partners, we select the Social Entrepreneur of the Year in over 25 countries. To search and identify the leading social innovators in South Africa, we have partnered with Ernst & Young, and I would like to thank them for their cooperation. The winner has not been chosen yet, but I'm delighted to announce to you the winning finalists of the Social Entrepreneur Award for 2008 for South Africa. And I will ask them to join me on stage. Shane Immelman. The Labdesk Company. Almost 30% of all students in South Africa attend school each day without a school desk, one of the most basic educational tools. In just 3 short years, more than 300,000 portable school desks, the lap desk, have been brought to schools across South Africa. LabDesk has been able to elevate the learning conditions of underprivileged children by providing them with their own effective writing and working surface, both in the classroom and at home, by leveraging an innovative business model using corporate sponsorship. LabDesk has a vision to serve all emerging countries, and in 2008 will be distributing more than 165,000 LabDesks to children in 11 other African countries, from Angola to Malawi and the Sudan. Kobani Tonke. He is accepting the award for the founders of Ubuntu Education Fund, Banks Kwazula and Jacob Leaf. Ubuntu was started in 1999 in Ibai, a township near Port Elizabeth, initially to help schools set up computer centers and libraries. The holistic community-led approach that developed focuses on filling the gaps and increasing the capacity of existing delivery services. For example, school feeding programs support nutrition and learning, and health programs support government clinics with HIV counseling, testing and treatment. The approach is based on the tenet that all communities have within them an array of resources and capabilities, and Ubuntu has the concurrent responsibility to facilitate the mobilization and utilization of these assets. Congratulations. Charles Maisel. He is a serial social innovator. He has created several organizations: Innovation Shack, Men on the Side of the Road, 5 in 6 Project, Black Umbrellas, Shoebox Homes. He has identified complex challenges such as unemployment, housing, and HIV as opportunities, and creates sustainable organizations with market-based principles to tackle them. Men on the Side of the Road is the only project of its kind to organize, train, and place more than 100,000 unemployed men. Linked to this is a unique incentive-based HIV testing model for unemployed men that has proven highly effective. The 5 in 6 project is a domestic violence model that focuses on male prevention programs. Black Umbrellas is a full support service program for black individuals who want to start a small business, and Shoebox Homes was created as a social business to design and create furniture specifically for people living in informal housing and small spaces where typical furniture does not fit. Trevor Mulauzi. The Clean Shop. Yeah, we can't see you. Come on. Trevor Mulauzi has created the Clean Shop. He recognized how the lack of decent toilet facilities in schools was negatively affecting the education of school children. His entrepreneurial spirit spurred him on to create the Clean Shop. The company now conducts daily cleaning and hygiene services for hundreds of schools, as well as universities, mines, supermarkets, petrol stations, etc., so that more than 40,000 people benefit from clean facilities and hygiene education. It is poised to take on many more schools in partnership with the South African government. Finally, we have Patrick Schofield. Streetwires Artists Collective. Patrick Scofield has revolutionized and formalized the informal wire and bead market, not only growing the social business of streetwires and its craftsmen and women, but lifting the status of these crafts into art forms, giving it its true aesthetic and economic value. By creating innovative and formal systems of craft development with marketing to local and international audiences, Streetwires ensures the producers a fair price for their art, making it the first fair trade craft organization in South Africa. Through government-certified training programs, its artists and students are also empowered with qualifications and skills to create their own enterprises in the industry. Congratulations to all of you, and thank you for the contribution you are making to society.
Congratulations again to the social entrepreneurs, and our high appreciation again for the panelists of this opening session of our 18th World Economic Forum on Africa. Thank you.